How the hobby loves a great conspiracy theory. So when a collector recently submitted a bunch of cards to PSA to get graded, and many of them came back as PSA 9s, and then they accepted PSA's instant offers to sell some of those PSA 9s, but the grades on those cards were mysteriously bumped up to PSA 10s after they sold them, you better believe that many collectors were on maximum alert when all of that went down last week. But I'm here to tell you, this wasn't actually a conspiracy at all. I'll give you the full explanation from PSA of what happened next. And despite what social media may have you believe, PSA is not an evil company and they don't have big conflicts of interest. Rather, I think PSA may actually be the smartest company in the entire hobby. Hear me out. I'll explain why next. The Geoff Wilson Show is brought to you by Arena Club, the official home of slab packs. Now available every day, slab packs offer an exciting way to collect graded cards with confidence. Plus, every pack comes with an instant offer to buy your slab. Don't miss out. Explore the latest slab packs and more by downloading the Arena Club app. Just search Arena Club in the App Store and use promo code SCI for 20% off your first purchase. All right, so right off the bat, because I know people are already typing it in the comments, yes, I have an extensive business relationship with PSA, but no, that does not mean that I am not telling you the truth today or that I'm giving you some biased opinion. I am spitting facts today. I am telling you exactly what happened in this situation and giving you how I truthfully feel about this situation. And yes, my business relationship, it extends in a lot of different areas with PSA. PSA occasionally advertises on the Sports Card Investor channel. We did our graded Grails repack at Cards HQ with PSA in the sense that it's the world's first PSA certified repack. And we even just announced that PSA is opening up a PSA staffed submission center within Cards HQ. It's opening up starting this weekend, the first in the world outside of PSA's home city, actually having PSA employees in Cards HQ 7 days a week when it fully gets going to accept your grading submissions. It's a big deal. So yes, it is an extensive business relationship that I and my companies have with PSA. But because of that, I was also able to get some information from PSA about actually what went down here. And my business relationship with PSA, not biasing what is being said here at all today. So let's get that out of the way and let's jump in. So this was the story. If you weren't aware of this, this all took place last week on Twitter, on X, where a user named Preston, a TCG collector named Preston, said that he submitted a grading order to PSA. I believe it was 31 Pokemon cards that he sent off to PSA to get graded. And then he got his grading reveal when they finally got graded. None of the 31 cards got PSA 10s. None, which is pretty shocking with, ultra modern Pokemon cards. And he posted initially about that because he was surprised and annoyed that none of his cards got a PSA 10. And he looked some of them over. He thought a lot of them were worthy of a 10. 0 for 31 on a modern Pokemon order when you think a lot of those cards are going to get 10s. That's pretty shocking. So he posted that to social media. Then the story took an odd direction. He said that, as he did his grading reveal in the PSA app, that he started getting instant offers from PSA on a lot of those cards, as what happens now, right? PSA feeds up instant offers on cards when you're doing your grading reveal. He accepted some of those instant offers to sell his cards, and he got the money. And then a few days later, he noticed by comparing the cert number, same cert number on his cards that were PSA 9s, he noticed that several of the cards had been switched in grade from PSA 9 to PSA 10. He posted all of this to Twitter, to X. And of course, collectors and conspiracy theorists immediately cry foul. Everybody is rushing to the idea that PSA is buying cards off of collectors using their instant offers feature, and then they're bumping the grade up after they buy the card so that when they go to resell the card, they maximize the resale value. And everybody is saying, oh my gosh, that's what happened here. This is some huge conspiracy that PSA is doing this in order to maximize their profits. Now, of course, this sounds very salacious. And you can imagine that this post went viral and that many, many collectors had a lot to say about it. But there's more to the story. There's a very simple explanation as to what happened. It's not a conspiracy theory at all. So first of all, it should be noted that PSA reached out to the person and immediately reversed all of this. PSA said, whoa, major mistake here. This was a one-off corner case. They canceled the sales of him selling those cards as PSA 9s so that he could have the cards back as PSA 10s and choose to sell them again if he wanted to as PSA 10s. So that first of all, PSA immediately resolved the issue. Nat Turner, the owner of Collectors, the parent company of PSA, jumped into the conversation on social media, and he explained what happened. He actually reacted to a post that I put up about this to confirm what I thought had happened in this situation. He confirmed it as correct. So here's what went on. PSA will routinely flag certain orders that they find that they say this order needs additional review because something went unusual here. And they'll have one of their senior graders come in and review the order after the fact. In this case, what was unusual was the fact that this person submitted, I believe, 31 cards of Ultra Modern Pokemon and got 0 PSA 10s. That's unusual. And so it gave the person the grades in the app, but PSA had the order flagged as this order needs review by a senior grader. A senior grader then came in and reviewed the order and determined that the grader who had graded the cards had graded them too tough. The grader was too picky, and that there were actually, I believe it was 11 of the cards that, according to the senior grader, should have gotten a PSA 10, that the grader had graded too tough. So they adjusted the grades on those 11 cards from a PSA 9 to a PSA 10, and then that gets that into a more reasonable ratio for a 31 card submission, 11 cards as a PSA 10. That's what the senior grader said, that's what's going on here. And look, this makes sense because PSA has been scaling up. PSA has been bombarded with orders this year. You've seen the grading numbers, how they keep going up month after month after month. What this means is that PSA has been hiring a ton of employees, and they've got a lot of newer graders. They've got a lot of graders that don't have, maybe the years of experience because they've been having to add new people to the grading room. So I'm sure they're getting some inconsistency with their grading. I think a lot of people watching this video would say they feel like they've seen inconsistency with PSA grading this year. And I'm sure that they have certain graders that are grading a little tougher than others. And in this case, they probably had a more junior grader grade this order. And that person probably went a little too tough. And when the ratio of 0 PSA 10s out of 31 cards in an Ultra Modern Pokemon order was seen, that was flagged in their system as maybe this grader, was a little too tough, right? And that's when the senior grader got involved. Now, the problem that occurred is that PSA released the grades in the app before the senior grader got involved. That obviously was a mess up. That shouldn't happen. PSA needs to resolve their order of operations so that if an order is flagged for additional review, the grading reveal doesn't happen. And then the PSA instant offers don't happen either. And that's what really made this situation strange, right? Because as soon as the grading reveal, happens, then you start to get offers on your cards through PSA instant offers. So this person's getting offers at PSA 9 prices and accepting them. At the same time, the senior grader's reviewing the offer and deciding to bump certain cards up to 10s. But by the time the senior grader did that and then said, adjust these 11 certs so that they're PSA 10s, the person had already sold the cards under the PSA instant offer as PSA 9s. That's what happened. It's a corner case. It's not a widespread issue. In fact, there's no evidence on social media that I've seen that this has ever really happened before. But it happened in this one case. It was kind of a weird sequence of events. The biggest problem, once again, was that PSA released the grades and allowed the instant offers to come in the first place while the offer was still flagged for senior grader review. That's what happened. And look, there's still a lot of people out there on social media right now that are still claiming conspiracy. They're still saying, no. PSA was just caught red-handed. This is what PSA's doing to pump up their profits. They're bumping grades after they buy them. Look, that's nonsense. There's 3 reasons why this does not pass the test of this being some type of wide conspiracy theory or PSA doing this a whole bunch of times in a whole bunch of cases to a whole bunch of collectors. First of all, if this were that widespread, we would have seen other examples. And this is the only example of this particular sequence of events happening that I have ever seen on social media. There's been a lot of social media chatter about this, so why aren't there more examples? If this happened more than once, I think we would see more examples of this on social media. So right there, I think that this debunks the idea that this is some type of widespread conspiracy. Number 2, honestly, PSA is not going to risk their entire business over doing this. PSA is a billion-dollar company. You think they're going to risk their entire company off of trying to squeeze a few more dollars off of low-end Pokemon cards by bumping grades from 9 to 10s? I don't buy that. That's way too much risk for a company that size to try to squeeze a few extra dollars. It doesn't make any sense. And if you say, well, Geoff, it's more than a few dollars because if they were to do this, millions of times a year, that's a lot of money. Yeah. But if they were to do this millions of times a year, we would surely see hundreds or thousands of other examples of this happening on social media, and we don't. So it's not happening. It's not happening. And the third reason is that if this actually were happening to any widespread degree, there would be whistleblowers, employees within PSA. So not just people on social giving examples, but you'd have employees within PSA saying, there might be some unethical things happening within the company. Come on, you'd have ex-employees, like word would get out, right? I mean, if they were doing this to the degree that some people, some conspiracy theorists would like to believe that they are, then there would have to be a lot of employees within PSA who are in the know as to what's happening. But there's not. Otherwise, at least one of those employees would come forward anonymously and tell the stories and all that kind of thing. And by the way, most conspiracy theories in the world fall apart when you consider those 3 types of factors. I mean, it doesn't, not just sports card industry conspiracy theories, but most conspiracy theories in general. People love sharing and spreading and believing in conspiracy theories. I don't know why. It's some part of like the human psychology that like we're drawn to these salacious conspiracy theories, but almost all of them are not true. And when you really think about them logically, you begin to realize they're not true because for those same 3 reasons, right? First of all, if that widespread conspiracy theory was actually happening, we'd see a lot of examples of it. But if you don't see a lot of examples of it, then it can't really be a widespread conspiracy. Second of all, whoever's committing the conspiracy, are they really going to risk their brand or their company or their reputation by doing that? And in most cases, the answer is no. They wouldn't. It wouldn't make any sense for them to do it. And then finally, if that giant conspiracy were actually happening, wouldn't there be people on the inside who would eventually blow the whistle on it? Wouldn't there be whistleblowers? In most cases, yes. You can't really pull off widespread conspiracies in any aspect of life. You can't really do it because you'd have to have too many people in the know in order to execute it. And one of those people would talk. One of those people would leak the information. You can't get a widespread group of people to stay quiet about some type of, illicit thing that's taking place. It just doesn't happen. So most conspiracy theories are not true. And in this case, it's not some conspiracy theory. That's not what's going on. Oh, and there's one more fact that people are really misunderstanding. There's a lot of talk right now about, well, PSA has an inherent conflict of interest. They're grading cards and then buying the cards. There's a lot of people that are like, this instant offers thing is evil. It's really bad because PSA, because they're grading the cards and then buying the cards from people who submit them for grading, they're more motivated and more likely to give those cards 10s, or give favorable treatment to cards that they are later going to buy. But that's completely wrong. PSA doesn't actually buy the cards. People misunderstand this. PSA Instant Offers is not PSA making you an offer to buy your card. PSA Instant Offers is a network of card dealers who are making offers to buy cards, and PSA is facilitating those offers. Cards HQ, by the way, is one of those dealers. We use PSA Instant Offers to place offers on cards, to buy cards that are coming out of grading. It's not PSA buying the cards. It's PSA facilitating the offer for Cards HQ to buy your cards. And a whole bunch of other dealers who are using PSA Instant Offers to buy your cards. So if your conspiracy theory or your conflict of interest is that PSA is grading the card and then buying the card, that's wrong. PSA is not buying the card. PSA is grading the card, and then PSA is facilitating a network of dealers being able to make offers on your card and buy your card if you accept their offer, right? Now, I will give one side note to that, and that is that PSA has formed a partnership with GameStop on GameStop's Power Packs. And I don't know for sure, but I assume that GameStop is probably using PSA Instant Offers to buy cards for the GameStop Power Packs. Since PSA is involved in that as a joint venture, you could say, okay, well, in some sense, through the GameStop partnership, GameStop is buying the cards, but PSA is benefiting from it because PSA is part of the joint venture. Okay. That may be true. So that's a little bit of conflict of interest, but it's in kind of a multi-step convoluted manner. It's not a direct conflict of interest to the degree that a lot of people think it is, just because they misinterpret what's happening. When PSA makes you an offer, it's misinterpreted that PSA is buying your cards, and that's just simply not the case. What PSA has done is PSA has created vertical integration. PSA is looking at every step of the collector journey that's involved in submitting a card for grading, getting the card back from grading, deciding where to store it, PSA Vault, insuring it, PSA Vault, selling it, Instant Offers, PSA's connection with eBay. PSA wants a piece of the pie everywhere. They want a little bit of every step of the customer journey. It's vertical integration. And by the way, it's what every company strives to do. Every company strives for vertical integration. PSA is very smart and savvy about the fact that they have found ways now to get involved and get a little piece of the pie at every step of the journey of grading and then storing and selling your card. It's smart of PSA to do this. It's the same thing that's happening everywhere in big company business, even in the sports card hobby. How about Topps? Topps manufactures and sells product to breakers. Breakers then open that product on Fanatics Live. Fanatics, Topps, same company. Then when big cards are hit out of those breaks, many of them end up for sale on Fanatics Collect. Right? So you got Topps manufacturing the cards. You got breakers then breaking them on a platform that is owned by Topps parent company. And then you've got some of those cards being sold on a marketplace that is owned by Topps parent company. It's smart. It's vertical integration. That's the same thing that PSA is doing. And by the way, it's happening everywhere. Apple doesn't just design and manufacture its own products. It also owns the retail stores, the Apple stores. It also owns the App Store on your phone. It also owns the service centers to repair the Apple products. I mean, you want to talk about conflict of interest. How about the fact that Apple makes the product, and then when the product breaks, they service the product? So if they make the product a little less good, their service group will get more revenue, right? I mean, look, conflicts of interest in that kind of manner, they're just inherent with big business doing business. It doesn't always mean that it's evil. It doesn't always mean that it's wrong. It's just smart business. Of course, like Tesla, right? Tesla makes the car. They manufacture the car. They own the showrooms. They manage direct sales. They actually sell you the car directly. They also own the service centers. And Tesla owns the charging infrastructure to charge your car. And Tesla provides the insurance for your car. Tesla is all over every stage of the car owning journey. How about Amazon? Amazon has the warehouses. Amazon owns its own airline to transport its products. Amazon owns Amazon Web Services, which is the hosting environment to host its website and zillions of other websites. Amazon also manufactures and sells its own products. Amazon's trying to get a piece of the pie everywhere. It's vertical integration. Starbucks owns their own farms. And they own their own distribution companies, in addition to owning the coffee shops themselves, right? So what PSA is doing, I think, as a business person, is very smart business. And they need, obviously, integrity is extremely important. And they need to protect themselves from having conflicts of interest that sharply question the integrity of what they're doing. There's a couple of things that they need to do. One is they need a little bit better PR around all of this, right? Like the fact that so many people think that instant offers are PSA buying cards themselves. They got to resolve that. That's a PR issue. Like PSA should make clear to collectors what's going on there to quell some of this social chatter about, this conflict of interest, which really in that case doesn't truly exist, or at least to the degree that collectors are accusing PSA of that existing. So PSA needs to do, I think, a little bit better job of telling the story behind all of this. And I think that would hopefully settle some people's fears down. The second thing they need to do is they need to look at their internal processes and make sure that they are structured in such a way that conflicts of interest could not naturally arise within those processes. So, for example, it's really important that PSA separates the graders, makes them blind from who's submitting the card, right? The graders should never know who the submitter is. And by the way, PSA has told me this rule is already in place. This is already how things are. The graders don't know who the submitter is. When the cards go to the graders for processing, they're not getting like paperwork with the cards saying this card belongs to this person. Because if that were the case, then obviously you can get into the conflict of interest of what if a grader, knows the submitter, right? And is trying to give favorable grades to a certain submitter. The grading room needs to be blind to everything else in PSA. It needs to be completely cut off from everything else in PSA with no information flowing in and out of that room other than just the cards to grade. And from what I understand, that is how PSA already has it structured. That's important to prevent conflicts of interest. And by the way, PSA should explain that. PSA should explain that to clear up any misconceptions that people may have that certain submitters get favorable grades, or, there are always those types of conspiracy theories out there, right? Also, the grading room should be completely separated from PSA offers. So the money of buying cards, the grading room should never be exposed to that. The grading room should grade independently. They should grade based on the card. They should have no information that there's an offer that would be made on this card through instant offers if it comes back as a 10 or if it comes back as a 9 or anything like that, right? That needs to be separated out. And Nat Turner said that is separated out. Nat Turner said that the graders have no awareness, no information about offers that may or may not be pending on cards when they're done getting graded. So that's already separated by PSA. And that's important that for the integrity of what PSA is doing. But I believe that's already been addressed, right? It's important that PSA's graders never get incentivized based on revenue. They should never be connected to revenue, right? They should not be getting bonuses for giving more PSA 10s, or if cards they're grading are selling on instant offers, then they get a cut of the action, or if there's upcharges related to cards that they're getting a cut of the action. Obviously, that shouldn't happen. That can't happen. That would be bad for business if that happened, and I don't believe that is happening. I don't think that is happening. But PSA needs to make sure that doesn't ever happen. Like, it should never happen, right? And I don't think that it is. But that would be another important way for PSA to protect their integrity and ensure there are no conflicts of interest. And then finally, PSA should not be buying cards they're grading. They should not. And they're not, at least directly. Maybe in an indirect manner, as I said earlier, through the GameStop Power Packs, which, if that's the case, I don't love that. But at least it's a separate company controlled by GameStop. So it's controlled by another company, right? It's GameStop's Power Packs. It's controlled by GameStop, even though PSA may be getting a cut of that action. But in general, I do not think PSA should be buying cards that are graded by PSA. PSA should be facilitating offers on cards. That's fine. I have no issue with PSA facilitating Cards HQ buying cards from people who are grading them through PSA. And that's what's happening. That's what PSA Instant Offers is, and that's how we take advantage of it here at Cards HQ. So if PSA does those things, I believe that gives them a lot of integrity, and I believe that eliminates the idea that they have these inherent conflicts of interest in their business. And from what I understand, they are doing all of those things. So I think PSA is taking this seriously. I think PSA understands that there could be conflict of interest that could arise with some of this. And I think they're doing, in my opinion, from what I understand, I think they're doing the right thing to help prevent that type of thing from occurring. I think all the vertical integration stuff they're doing, it's just smart, savvy business, and how it's how big business should be run and is being run. So that's it. That's my take on the entire situation, guys. I would love to hear what you think in the YouTube comments. And don't forget, the full-length episodes of these Geoff Wilson shows, they're available on YouTube under the Geoff Wilson Show on YouTube, also on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. So make sure you're subscribed everywhere so you can listen to these shows on the go. Thanks for watching. See you next week with my next one. Take care.